I decided to close my membership down in June. Given that it was my primary revenue stream and it had been my full-time job and my life for the last 2 years, a lot of people have asked me why. And of course, I had my reason. And that's why I wanted to make this video, to share with you some of the reasons why I closed down my membership and maybe some of the pitfalls to avoid if you're thinking that you might want to run a membership program. I'm Lex Roman, I'm a marketer, I'm a marketing creator. I'm really interested in subscription businesses. I've been doing growth work for over a decade, and I'm really exploring these different revenue models. Which ones are easy to sell, which ones are easy to operate. And today we're talking about memberships. So I've made a couple videos about my membership growth trackers. I made one in January about some of the things that we were changing and optimizing. By June, I had decided that it was time to ramp it down. To give you a little bit of context about this membership, I started this program, Growth Trackers, in August of 2022. It was for creative solopreneurs, creative entrepreneurs, web designers, podcast producers, copywriters, coaches, folks like that who need to book clients and are finding the marketing game frustrating. The marketing and sales game is a grind. It's confusing, it's complex. So Growth Trackers was there to help people experiment and get on the right track about what their channels, audiences, and messages should be. When I launched in August of 2022, the founding member price was $125, and over the course of the last 2 years, it went up as high as $500 a month. Most of the members ended up paying somewhere between $300 and $500 a month. When I started, I had everyone commit to 3 months, and I did, for most members did that, right? Where they committed for 3 months. But I went back and forth on that. Like, do I really need people to commit for a long time? Can we just do month by month? You know, ultimately a membership, you kind of need to invest a little bit. Like, it's unlikely you're going to see a ton of return in a month unless you really buckle in and do all the stuff that's available to you. So that's a little bit why I did that. But towards the end, I got looser with that because it was like too much admin to have to manage those cohorts. And so month by month became more of the norm. I had really good retention with Growth Trackers. The members that I did have were awesome. Most folks stayed for 6 months. I had some folks that stayed for over a year, some folks that would pause and come back during the course of the program. And I even had one member that was with me the entire time, or most of the time. So that strong retention is really why I was able to run it for as long as I could, because it wasn't that easy to sell Growth Trackers. It never got easier to sell Growth Trackers. And that is reason number one why I decided to shut it down. One of the big warning signs there was that even though members loved the program and they stayed with it for so long, way longer than I would have expected them to, and they were telling people about it, their referrals were not often coming in as new members. So there was like a broken growth loop there. And funny enough, this is what I teach in Growth Trackers, this idea of the amplification loop. People who like you, who trust you, who buy from you, telling others, bringing in those warm leads. And for me, that was pretty much always broken in Growth Trackers. Now, there was one thing I did to fix this, and it did improve. I launched something called Guest Pass, where you could refer someone to Guest Pass. They would get on an email list. It was like a lead magnet style setup. They would get on an email list. They would be invited to come try out a couple sessions. That did work to get more members in from referrals because it was a softer referral path. They didn't have to go straight to a sales conversation with me or straight to a buy moment. They could come in, see some emails, see sort of who I am, come to a session for free, and have a chat with me after the session. So that worked really well, but not well enough, right? Like it fixed some things. It definitely improved that metric, but it was like, I really expected that to pop off. I mean, I had hundreds of people on the Guest Pass waitlist, and I had several people come into those sessions, and a lot of them just couldn't get their act together about whether or not they were going to come into the membership. And a lot of the objections that I was getting, you know, it was kind of hard to overcome. I just sort of felt like I hit a dead end on the sales side where I was producing a lot of free content. I was allowing people to come into sessions. I was providing tools and incentives for referrals, and it just wasn't quite clicking together. The second reason why I shut down Growth Trackers is that it was operationally really complex to run. And that's on me because I am an over executor. And when I launched this program, I had a huge vision for it. I really wanted it to be comprehensive. I really wanted it to be high quality. And so like my first summer of Growth Trackers, I rented a video studio and hired a videographer and recorded professional videos for the entire first 3 months of the program. And I did that actually for several months after that. Like the first 6 months in Growth Trackers were professional quality videos. And that was a huge mistake. I don't know why I did that. But on top of that, I created hundreds of original sessions. I brought in probably 25 different guest experts. I created an original workbook. I created merchandise like this, custom merchandise that I sent folks, custom packaging for the merchandise, like custom boxes. I just sort of went the extra mile on everything, and that was a huge mistake. Like, I shouldn't have done that. It doesn't matter that much to people. They don't pay any more for something like that than for just like a Slack group that they might be in, right? Like, I pay $100 for a Slack that I'm in, and that's all it is. I just get access to a Slack, and there's a call once a week, right? And so, you know, I started moving towards a standard where I was hosting 5 workshops a week, bringing in 1 guest expert a month, sometimes hosting challenges. We started hosting these quests, and we would do the LinkedIn quest, we did the reviews to riches quest, we did the chat to close quest, and people loved that stuff. It was just like a lot to make that fun and gel together, and I just couldn't do it that long. Like, I just couldn't continue to do it. I needed to be compensated more for that amount of effort. But once you set that standard, it's like hard to peel that back, right? So once you're like, we're gonna have all these things, it's hard to be like, and now I'm taking all those things away, but you're gonna pay the same price. So that's something that's really tricky about a membership that you really need to watch for. I actually did launch pretty light because luckily I hired a membership coach who helped me back off my over execution brain early on. And we pulled back a lot of the stuff that I was planning to do originally. But I started over executing maybe like 6 to 9 months in. You have to watch for that because you can't pull that stuff back very easily in a membership. You kind of have to bring in new members in order to make that transition or sort of cancel everyone and start over. And so I wish that I had been more careful with those over execution like promises that I made and the things that I chose to deliver. I wish I had just been a lot more careful with that because it became unmanageable for me, and it became especially frustrating when members wouldn't come to sessions. As I picked up the pace on sessions, less and less members would come to them. And so I had several sessions with just 1 member. And that was always a huge bummer when there was like a new member and they were excited to meet everyone, but no one was there but me. And I was like, this is like not gonna work, right? So that became my challenge. And I talked about this in the video in January. How do I get people here? And this is reason number 3 why I shut down the membership, which is like dealing with human behavior is hard. And I just couldn't manage all the personalities, time zones, schedules, priorities, channels, focuses, preferences of everyone in the group. I couldn't do that at the scale that I was at. And so when I don't do that, then I have a percentage of members that are not being that well served. And then guess what? They stop showing up. And whether or not they keep paying me, it sort of degrades the quality of the membership for everyone. That alone, I think, is a reason to really think twice about a membership. It's just hard to solve well for everyone. That's a reason also to keep it simple and to think of it more like a subscription and less of a community play. I think community plays are really tricky because human behavior is such a huge factor there. Like, it's not a community if people don't show up, bring their personality, bring their perspective, bring their activity, right? Like, if we're on a Zoom and you're like camera off and never talking, it's just a dead end experience. And so that is hard to solve for. And that became such a mental challenge for me. It was like, you know, if I can't keep the vibe high and it's hard to sell new folks in, we're just kind of in a lock here where, you know, I'm pushing the train forward, but I don't know how long this is gonna last. I've noticed that other membership programs and communities are shutting down or peeling back, or, you know, founders are selling their programs, and I get it because it's just a real grind and it's sort of thankless because the other thing is that you don't necessarily get credit for those results. People forget the results or they don't execute the things that you're doing together, which, you know, you can't control what people do. They're gonna do it or not. I had a few members that, you know, they were just never gonna execute. And it's their life, right? But it's a bummer for me. If you've been in my program for months and you're not gonna execute on it, it's just a bummer. And then that relationship is kind of a dead end because at some point you're gonna leave and also you're not a good referral. So it's like, that's not gonna work, right? It's quite different from a client relationship where even if your client sucks, like, you can deliver the work, right? So you have something to show for that. In a membership, it really depends so much more on the member than on you. Like, you can show up, but if they don't show up to meet your energy, then you got nothing, right? You got a little bit of money and that's really it. So now I'm thinking much more about this idea of subscriptions. Like, I do, honestly, I miss MRR. I miss having recurring revenue. That's really nice. And I miss not having to take on clients. Like, I didn't take on clients pretty much for 2 years. for most of the time I was running growth trackers, I did not take on clients, or I didn't have to take on clients, right? I could do it opportunistically. I missed that quite a bit. So now I'm thinking about, could I make something that's operationally lighter, where it's more of a subscription? I'm delivering something and it's totally your choice whether or not you use it or don't use it. And it's cheaper and lighter weight. Now the challenge with subscriptions is that you need a bigger audience. With a membership, you can actually sell that to a small audience. So my newsletter, when I started Growth Trackers, my newsletter was probably less than 500 people. Now it's like 1,400 people. And the wait list, like I said, got up to, a couple hundred, but I've always been a small audience person. And you can sell a membership with a small audience. I think you can even do better than me if you have a better match with your audience. But with a subscription, if you're selling something for like 10, 20 bucks a month, you really need a big audience because you need a lot of people to buy into that thing. I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about what is that thing that I could deliver that would make sense in that model? Because, for the last few years, I've been really more of a teacher, where it's the like FaceTime with me that people like. It's the fact that I can think through your problem in real time, which I can't do in a subscription model really so much. So what is something that I could deliver that you would just receive? That is something that I am thinking about. I'm also thinking about that idea of, I'm sort of getting sick of this word, but like niche, right? Category. What is the spot that I'm filling for someone? Because one of the challenges with growth trackers is, while the program itself was unique, and once people were inside there, they were like, this is amazing. Why are more people here? It was always really hard to position in the market because there's so much marketing, lead gen bullshit everywhere. That just was an uphill battle. And so my next subscription is for sure going to be much more unique and small, where that positioning isn't going to be as hard. And you might be like, Lex, all positioning is hard and everyone struggles with it. And it's like, that's not true. Like, I have positioned a couple other businesses where it was just so much more obvious that this was the thing that you needed to buy. And I just didn't have as much of a sales problem. And going from those businesses, which were like, oh, this is so easy, into this one, I was just like, I need to help people learn this, because wow, is it hard. If you screw up some of those factors, it just gets so hard. And so that's why growth trackers exist, because I learned that it wasn't always so easy to run a business. And you change a couple factors, you change an audience focus, you change what you're offering, the whole game is different. Okay, I want to end this with just a few takeaways. If you are thinking about doing a membership, I'm not saying don't do a membership, I'm just saying that I screwed it up. I want to give you just a few takeaways that you can use as you're planning your membership. The first one is to really be cognizant of the price point. So I would avoid the mid-hundreds range price point. I would either go for a low-cost subscription, sub $100, or for a very high-cost subscription, above $1,000. There's a couple reasons for that. One is that at the low cost, you just eliminate a lot of the sales barriers. More people are willing to just buy something sub $100 without talking to you. You can sell that through email, through webinars, through social media. Above $1,000, then it's like, you feel totally fine getting on a sales call. You're basically treating them like a client. It's much more high touch. And you're being compensated for that, right? If you're charging $1,000 and someone's gonna stick around 6 to 8 months, that's $6 to $8 grand. It's worth getting on the phone with them a couple times. You can really make that more of a high touch approach, and then you're just operating, a high cost subscription. Second thing is to be really choosy about your software. I chose Mighty Networks. I do not recommend them. I do not recommend them for everyone. I do not recommend them at all. They just killed interaction, killed community entirely. And when we ramped down on growth trackers, we all migrated over to Slack, and the community is super, super vibrant there. And it's what we had been missing. And honestly, Mighty just killed that entire thing for us. So seeing that shift of like the same group of people, I mean, we have some more people on Slack with us now, but like, it's fun over there. People are chatting every day. Like, none of that was happening in Mighty. Their platform's just broken as a community platform. But I would also just be choosy about where you end up. And the benefit of something like Slack or Facebook groups, not that I'm a fan of Facebook, is like, people are already there. So if you can show up to a place that people are already there, easier to get them to just like come over to your area. With Slack, there's just such a built-in advantage there that it's like in people's habits to be on Slack, which is so different from having a dedicated channel. I don't think Circle changes the game on that at all. I don't know about Discord. I think it really depends on your space and if people in your membership would also already be on Discord, right? It's about getting as close as possible to their standard behavior and not forcing additional behavior change. I just overall would run this a lot lower tech. Like, I made a custom workbook, I had a Vimeo account, like all these different widgets, and I think just like Slack and Notion is what I would do, and that's what we've like downgraded to as a community, which is really funny because it's like I created all these things and now they're just living in the most lo-fi tools. The third tip is that members get tired of you pretty fast. Hillary Bush at Pollen said something to me a couple months ago that was like, there's no scarcity to Hillary, meaning in her own community, everyone has tons of access to her. And that was true for me as well, right? I gave members too much access to me. And so they didn't take me up on offers to spend time with me. And they didn't take me up on expertise that I have. They didn't take me up on sessions that I offer. Now that's an overgeneralization, right? Some members did. I had some members that really got their money's worth, but a lot of members didn't, right? And I over-delivered on access. I over-delivered on events. So I would be really aware of what you're offering there. Be mindful of your own time and limit that access quite a bit because it gets old for them pretty fast. And then if they feel like they've gotten everything they needed or there's like no surprises left to unlock, they might leave. And so I would make that pretty boundaried. And I'm watching some membership operators now do that where they're just basically not available unless you're in a session with them. They're rarely on Slack and they're just very hands off with the group. And I really admire that. And I think you really got to think through that. Like, can I just show up once a week? Can I just show up a couple times a week, right? Like, what's the level of interaction that's going to make this valuable, but not over deliver? So like I said, I'm really interested in this space of non-tech subscriptions, right? Like, what are subscription businesses that are thriving, that are interesting, that are not in tech? I'm particularly interested in news and media, like newsletter subscription businesses. That's where I'm focused right now. But there's other kinds of subscriptions that people run, like Liz Wilcox's email swipe subscription. I forget what she calls it. That's a great example of a non-tech subscription. I think she charges $9 a month for that, right? And again, you need a big audience to pull something like that off. I'm really looking for this audience equilibrium where I can shift from these higher touch programs to lower touch programs, lower touch subscriptions. Like, what is that audience count and can I get there quickly? Because I think the delivery on that is so much more exciting for me. I love the idea of delivering something that's much more repeatable, predictable, and lower cost, and honestly just more accessible for folks. So that's what I'm thinking about. I'm looking at journalists and how they're delivering their subscriptions. I'm studying that really closely. My business is different than that, but I think there's a lot to be learned from news and media subscriptions. I'm just a big fan of the newsletter game in general. If you find this interesting, if you're into recurring revenue, if you're into subscriptions, I have a new newsletter. It's called Revenue Rule Breaker. You can subscribe and hear from me about what I'm thinking about with these subscriptions. And also I'm planning to document more of this shift from membership to subscription there. I don't send that out very often yet, but I will soon. So get on that list. You can also follow me over at lexroman.com and check out my other projects.